What's up, everybody, and welcome to Crossover Thursday here on the Locked On Podcast Network. I'm Joe Marino, host of Locked On Bills, joined by James Rapien, the host of Locked On Bengals. We're here to get you ready for a big divisional round playoff matchup between the Buffalo Bills and the Cincinnati Bengals. Crossover Thursday is presented by our friends over at PrizePicks. PrizePicks is so much fun and it's easy to play. There's no competing with other players. It's just you versus the projections available. All you do is pick 2 to 5 players, and if they score more or less than their PrizePicks projection, you get up to 10 times your money on your entry. It can literally take less than 60 seconds to enter. It is that easy. We love PrizePicks, and we know that you will too. First-time users can receive a 100% instant deposit match up to $100 with promo code LOCKEDON. That's prizepicks.com, promo code LOCKEDON. Well, James, we had a feeling we'd be getting a chance to do this again, and here we are. Playoff matchup. This time it's in Buffalo. Welcome, a big story, big game here to reflect upon.
Oh man, it doesn't get much bigger, and it's one of those games where we previewed it a few weeks ago, and it felt like that game, that Monday night game, and we just got a snippet of it, of course. And I'm so grateful and thankful, and I think everybody in Cincinnati and throughout the Bengals fan base thankful that DeMar Hamlin is recovering and continues to do better and better, it seems like, with every update. But I thought we were in for a game, Joe. I thought just the start of it, the atmosphere at Paycor Stadium, the Bengals offense was playing well. Obviously, the Bills scored on their first possession. I was like, oh man, this is about to be a classic. And so that's kind of my expectation. And I think that's the storyline going into this one. Obviously, there's more on the line, but it's Burrow, it's Allen for the first time. That Week 17 game doesn't count. And so now it's that, and I think that's the story. Is this might be the game of the playoffs, and you don't know it until after the fact. But certainly a lot of Bills fans and Chiefs fans would have said that the game of the playoffs last year was the divisional round, right, in Kansas City, and everything that went into that game. Well, wouldn't shock me if this Bengals Bills game lives up to the hype as well.
You know, James, when I think about the 9-minute snippet of Bills Bengals that we got a chance to see, you know what stands out to me is Zach Taylor said, I want the ball. He said, I want the ball. And we're going deep on the first play. We're going at Trey White with Jamar Chase. And then obviously that touchdown pass to Tyler Boyd was vintage Joe Burrow, accurate, great route from Boyd. And they're obviously humming on that next drive. It was Josh Allen gets the ball, throws deep, right, draws the flag, and you could just see a very aggressive mentality from both teams. And that just gave us a little taste of the mindset of both of those teams for that game. And, obviously the stakes are even bigger this time around. Someone's losing streak's going to end, James. I know what did the Bengals, it was 8 or 9 in a row?
9 now.
9
now with the playoffs.
The Bills are at 8 in a row. So it's over for somebody on Sunday. And, I think you're going to see a really aggressive game plan from both teams. And that's my storyline for the Bills, is what is this offense going to look like? Because, James, over the last several weeks, the Bills have really leaned into this vertical passing offense. And certainly the Miami game that was just played in the playoffs was a big-time lean into the vertical passing game. I think something like 33% of Josh Allen's targets were 20 yards down the field. I mean, they were looking for some big plays, and Miami was blitzing like crazy, giving man coverage. And you know how it goes. This is very similar to what the Bengals have dealt with playing the Ravens so many times this year, and then so many times frequently, right? The Bills recently played the Dolphins, and the Ravens played the Bengals multiple times in a row. And so you just get new challenges, right? Because you know each other so well, and you don't want to necessarily lean into all the same stuff all the time. And so the Bills said, you know what? If you're going to blitz us all day long, we're going to throw it deep all day long and make you pay. And in some instances, they made them pay. And there were some really big throws from Josh Allen and some big explosive plays down the field. But also when you lean into low percentage plays, right? I don't care who your quarterback is. I don't care what receivers you have. Throwing the ball down the field is generally low percentage. And I think because of that, it introduced some lulls for the Bills on offense. And you saw that against the Dolphins, and even in some of their most recent games against the Bears and the Patriots, where they were big play hunting and they made a lot of big plays, but it came with some lulls. And you worry about that going into a game against Cincinnati, who, obviously Joe Burrow and Josh Allen can both score in bunches, but you don't want to have those lulls. And so I'm very interested in seeing if the Bills choose to stay very aggressive with their passing game, or if they become more balanced with their passing game, and then how much rushing offense they introduce into this ball game. The Bills have been a good rushing offense this year, number 7 in yards per game, number 2 in yards per attempt. And you feel like that's an advantage that they have, being a two-dimensional offense in ways that Cincinnati's not, especially being the home team. And so my storyline is, what is the offense going to look like? Is it going to be Josh Allen launching the ball down the field? Is it going to be more balanced in terms of the passing game? How much rushing offense is introduced? It seems like the Bills have offense options, which is a good thing, and that certainly puts the Bengals in an interesting spot from a preparation standpoint, because there's so many different ways the Bills can attack. But my storyline that I'm focused in on is, what are the Bills going to do offensively? What does this look like on Sunday afternoon?
And sticking with the offense, the Bengals' big storyline, and it's an unfortunate one, but it's the offensive line. And they're going to be without, barring a miracle, 3 of their 5 starters across their offensive line. La'el Collins, who wasn't out there for that Week 17 matchup, even though it was less than a quarter. He tore his ACL and is out for the year at right tackle. Akeem Adeniji will take his spot and start on Sunday. And he's played okay. But then you lose Alex Kappa in Week 18, and Max Sharping has to step up. And then last week, Jonah Williams goes down with a dislocated kneecap. Doesn't sound like he's going to be able to go this week. Maybe returns at some point during the playoffs. But you have to advance and survive. And so who plays left tackle? It was Jackson Carman against the Ravens. Will it continue to be Jackson Carman? He's not listed, by the way, on the Bengals official depth chart as a tackle at all. Deontay Smith is the backup tackle. So I think that's interesting. I also think there's a chance that Isaiah Prince, who's on the practice squad, could get elevated. So there's multiple guys, potentially at least, as we record this, in the running for that left tackle spot. And none of them make you feel great about the state of this offensive line, Joe. And what we saw last year from this team, yeah, they made a Super Bowl run, but it was a grind. And it was a grind because this offensive line was really, really bad. And they went out and they appeared to fix it in free agency. And it took some time, but this offensive line was really gelling. And this offense was gelling. Joe Burrow believed in it. At times this season, they showed they can run the ball. Well, when you lose Collins and you lose Kappa, 2 guys that were really great as run blockers, that run game has come back down to earth. And they were never amazing running it, but you're right. They've been one-dimensional in recent weeks. And so now I wonder, do they try to run it still with, backup linemen in? Or is this more of a aired out game? Let Joe Burrow cook, give him 2.5 seconds, and then he's, kind of going off on his own, making plays the way we've seen him do. I think that might be their plan. But can they at least be efficient on the ground? That's certainly a question mark as well. But it all starts with this offensive line. So who's in there at left tackle, and can this offensive line just be better than the one last year that really didn't do enough? They found ways to overcome it against Tennessee in the divisional round after he got sacked 9 times. Burrow played amazing in the AFC Championship game against the Chiefs to avoid being sacked a ton by Chris Jones and company. It's a big ask to go on the road and do that in any playoff game. So that's what I'm paying attention to.
I got a feeling these teams are going to lean into these quarterbacks. The run game will probably be secondary for both teams. And I have some thoughts to share on this Bills defensive line and its opportunity to take advantage of the Bengals offensive line here in just a moment in the matchup segment. But first, BetOnline.net is your number one source for sports betting info, stats, news, and analysis. You can get the latest odds and trends for every professional and amateur league out there. They have every sport over at betonline.net. And if you love sports podcasts, you can even find those as well over at BetOnline. They are always the fastest and easiest way to get your betting info. So head to the website today or use your mobile device to learn more. It's BetOnline, and it's where the game starts.
Joe, let's dive into these matchups because there are a ton of them to talk about, and I'm sure we'll get to the offensive line. But there's one you mentioned, and I thought it was mighty, mighty interesting in that Week 17 matchup. First play, Jamar Chase, Tre'Davious White. We know White was coming off of the ACL and hasn't played all season long. How has he played? Because I obviously watched a lot of that Miami game, and I thought he played pretty
Yeah.
well, and yet I also saw Jalen Waddle drop some passes or not catch some contested plays that I would expect Jamar Chase or T. Higgins, guys like that to make plays. So how is the secondary overall and specifically Tre'Davious White?
Tre'Davious White has started to work back in. He returned Thanksgiving against the Lions and played about 20% of the snaps and then about half the snaps. And then since then, it's been every single snap. And I think throughout the season, he's gained more confidence. And I think he's had some really good performances, especially against the Patriots lately. And um, some of those games on the stretch where you saw him start to make an impact at the catch point. But, obviously Jalen Waddle, a player that probably one of the 5 fastest receivers in the league, and Trey White's not going to be able to run with him. I thought he did a good job of using recovery speed and playing the hands and being able to force some incompletions there. But yeah, I think there's some stronger handed guys coming here in Chase and Higgins that can really present some challenges at the catch point. And so I think Trey White will obviously have a big test. I think you feel good about that to an extent if you're the Bills, because Trey White is one of your key franchise cornerstones, has been one of the better cornerbacks in the league over the last several seasons. Obviously, coming off of an injury, things can look a little bit different. And I think at times you've seen vintage Trey White, and at times you've seen him still kind of working back. But I think the consistency has leveled off recently. For me, I certainly am mindful of Trey White, but I'm really interested to see what they do at the other cornerback position, where the Bills have rotated all season long, whether it's been Kyer Elam, their first-round pick, Christian Benford, their sixth-round pick, who's really exceeded expectations, a rookie out of Villanova, and then Dane Jackson, who's played a lot of football over the last couple of years with Trey White being out and filling in when he's been asked to, and he's played fairly well. And they've been rotating, but the more this season plays out, the more you get comfortable with Kyer Elam. You certainly know as the first-round pick, with the size, the athleticism, the ball skills, he gives you the biggest chance to provide the best physical matchup to line up against these really good Bengals receivers. And certainly his best ability is his ball skills. And so I say all that to say, when Joe Burrow, a good, accurate quarterback, is going to want to throw the ball to really good catch point players in Higgins and Boyd, you'd like to lean into Kyer Elam. Now, the question is, will the Bills do it? Will he be the primary player opposite of Trey White, or is the rotation going to continue? I think Bills fans are really hoping to see Kyer Elam as the guy who gives you the best chance, I think, to match up against those receivers.
Yeah, this matchup, and the reason I kind of skipped over the offensive line is we know the Bengals offensive line is below average now. I've kind of accepted that. And if they're going to win in advance, a big reason why they did last year is because Burrow was playing out of his mind and the skill players made big plays in big moments. The Chiefs game, it was just one big play after another. And all throughout that run, they had issues in the trenches. But to overcome that, they had a great quarterback, great play from their skill guys. And I think that this is a matchup where Bill's secondary, Bengals skill players as a whole, and you could throw the running backs and Hayden Hurst and all of these guys in that bucket, along with Tyler Boyd, of course. I haven't mentioned him yet. They need to win that if they're going to escape Orchard Park with a win. And it really is that simple to me. Now, there's a lot of other variables, but this matchup is a big one, because if Jamar Chase, if his longest catch is 19 yards and you don't generate any big plays, are you going to be able to march downfield 5 times, 6 times and score? I think that's a lot to ask when your offensive line is flawed that way. So you're going to need some big plays. It doesn't mean you can't score 6 times, but it means that you're going to have some big plays where they're not 10, 12 play drives like they've been in recent weeks.
Well, James, I know we've all acknowledged the status of the Bengals offensive line, but excuse me, what's interesting to me about it is I don't think the Bills have done a good job this year of taking advantage of undermanned offensive lines. Last week against the Dolphins is a great example where, they had a practice squad left guard. Their right guard played right tackle, a backup right guard. Teron Armstead played with like 15 different injuries after missing the last couple weeks. And I didn't think they did a good enough job affecting Skylar Thompson, a 7th round, 3rd string quarterback that held onto the ball for like 3.2 seconds per play. Right. And
Forever.
so if I don't think, right, dude, if you can't get that guy under duress more. I have a level of concern about the Bills being able to really take advantage of this Bengals offensive line against Joe Burrow, who's really good under pressure, right? And he's very good at finding his answers when he's under pressure. And I think his sack avoidance is something that has gotten better and better. And so while I think the Bills have talent on their defensive line, and I think we kind of got into this last time we spoke with several first and second round picks, but Von Miller's not going to play in this game. And if Von Miller were playing, you would really be licking your chops and excited about your opportunities against this offensive line. But I don't think it's been the same since he's not been available with their pass rush, especially their organic pass rush, sending just 4 rushers. And I think some of their best moments getting after the quarterback has been needing to blitz a Matt Milano or a Tremaine Edmonds. Well, blitz Joe Burrow and you're done, right? This guy kills the blitz. So I have a level of concern about the Bills really being able to take advantage of the opportunities that you think they should have rushing the passer because it hasn't shown up with the level of consistency that we hopeful for. And I preview every game obviously on Locked On Bills. And I know these players. I talk about the opportunities that the Bills are going to have. And I feel like there's been so many times this year where it's like, well, they're without both their guards, or they're with this third string right tackle is going to play. And the impact hasn't been there to the level you would expect. And I think it has to change this week, but history doesn't really tell a good story when I forecast this matchup.
Yeah, that has to change. If the Bills are going to win, obviously they could, just outscore the Bengals, I guess, right? That's realistic too. But I think that's you have to take advantage of it and find a way to get some heat on Burrow. And so that's a huge matchup. Obviously, it's the biggest storyline being talked about here in Cincinnati right now. Because if you just let Burrow sit back there, if he has, he won't have 3.2 seconds. He won't hold the ball that long. But if he has 3.2 seconds, Joe, I mean,
good night. Yeah, good night.
Okay,
we know. Yeah,
and so it'll be much different. Is my point. So how do they? And by the way, part of this is getting up for Skylar Thompson, and that game was much closer, I think, than anyone anticipated. Getting excited to play Skylar. I feel like this is going to be a completely different vibe for both teams versus division rivals where backup quarterbacks. Not that they weren't up for the game, but it's much different.
It's different
this week. Yeah. But that's interesting. It is, and I'm sure a lot of Locked On Bengals listeners, when you were saying that, were like, "Well, if you're not affecting Burrow, then sign us up," because that's the concern all week long. On the flip side, I think it's going to be interesting to see how Lou Anarumo, how this defense combats Josh Allen in this just arsenal of weapons he has, especially with the downfield passing. Because I watched Eli Apple get beat on a double move by Demarcus Robinson the other day for 41-yard touchdown. And no disrespect to Tyler Huntley and Demarcus Robinson, but they're no Josh Allen and insert whatever Bills wide receiver you want to mention. Obviously, Stephon Diggs leads the way, but they're going to have to be more sound because they were on their heels for the first 3 quarters against a unique offense. Of course, it's different in Baltimore, and Huntley played pretty well, but you got to find a way to get stops, and they weren't getting many of them in the first 3 quarters.
Well, my other matchup I had written down that I was curious about was Bills wide receivers against the Bengals cornerbacks. Yeah. And, I've given all the flowers I can to Lou Anarumo and a lot of this Bengals defensive personnel. I love their front. I love their linebackers. I love their safeties. I don't love their corners. I think Cam Taylor-Britt, has a bright future, but he's still a rookie that's finding his way. He's kind of been up and down. And, Eli Apple, for I think the moments he's played better at times, I think he's still Eli Apple, a player that any team's going to go into a matchup and really target as an opportunity to really potentially take advantage of. And I'm curious to hear from you, James, on what you think this looks like, because I've heard a lot of comments about the Bengals and having success against quarterbacks that can extend plays. I know not every quarterback's just like Josh Allen, but I think conceptually guys that can extend plays and put stress on defenses that way is something to be mindful of. And so Lou Anarumo, I think he's got all the answers. I really do. What answers do you think he's going to have for this matchup?
Oh, yeah, I think he's going to have a lot of wrinkles, and you're right. The cornerback room, it's just a lot to ask, and it's a lot to ask because Allen can extend plays. And I think the first thing, it sounds so simple, But regardless of what you're rolling out there schematically, you better tackle, and you better be able to get Josh Allen down and at least hold on so someone else can come help you tackle him, because he's a big guy, right? And that's going to be the difference of, between 8 yards and 22 yards. I think that they'll do some drop 8 stuff, not a ton, but they'll mix that in big moments and try to surprise Josh Allen. Will that happen? I don't know. And I think that's an edge too, that Allen got to see it, even though it was for a drive, got to face it, and vice versa. The Bengals got to face this Bills defense. I think that matters a little bit. Now, could there be a bunch of different wrinkles? Yeah, absolutely. There's going to be some differences. But guarding Diggs, I think they're probably going to, and I don't blame them. I would just double them, because you mentioned it. Is it Eli Apple? You don't feel great about that matchup. Is it Cam Taylor-Britt? Well, one-on-one, those two guys, that's nightmare. And so I think you have to double him, and you have to hope that whoever is on Gabe Davis is physical enough, is strong enough to play through it. And then you're going to need these safeties to step up and make big plays, because those are the veterans. Those are your stars in the back end. With no Chidobe Awuzie, it's going to be tough on the secondary if these corners are getting beat. So doubling Diggs, and then the other part of this, we didn't talk about the defensive line much, but they've been disruptive. This needs to be a Trey Hendrickson game. This needs to be Sam Hubbard again making some plays, and DJ Reader, who we talked about on our first crossover. Those guys need to step up, make plays, and be disruptive. So we'll see if they can do it. But yeah, it's going to be a huge chess match where Lou Anarumo, what he's doing in quarter one, is probably much, much different in the fourth. And I'm sure the Bills offense will adjust as well. And so we'll continue this conversation. We'll dive into some key matchup, or some key predictions, rather. It's early, but we're going to give our predictions. But first, a word from Built Bar. Built Bar is the #1 protein bar on the planet. High in protein, low in sugar, low in calories. It's perfect for you, whether you're in Buffalo, whether you're in Kansas City, whether you're in Atlanta or Cincinnati. Notice I mentioned all the places that the AFC Championship game could be held. You got to catch them today. And it's not just at Built.com now. You can get them at Walmart. You can get them at Sam's Club. And they have a flavor for everyone, whether it's their cookies and cream, double chocolate, coconut puffs. You're talking about bars that have 130 calories, 4 grams of sugar, 17 grams of protein. They're awesome. And peanut butter brownie, coconut almond. There's so many different flavors. So you can check them out at Built.com, or like I said, go to Sam's Club, go to Walmart, and, well, you could thank us later. Built Bar, the #1 protein bar on the planet.
All right, James, they make us do predictions. But before, I have a couple of questions I want to ask you.
Yeah, we haven't gotten to everything yet. Right? I agree. Go ahead.
Dude, like, all right, we'll get to the prediction in a second. But you started talking about this Bengals defensive line, which I think is really good. If they're all healthy, Hill, Reader, Hendrickson, Hubbard. I mean, that's as good as a front four as you're going to see in the league. And I think their depth has gained a lot of experience this year. Whether it's Cam Sample or Joseph Asai or Zachary Carter, who I think has been a lot better of late than I remember watching him on tape earlier this season. They've really benefited from their reps and opportunities here down the stretch. But I wanted to ask you about the relationship between a defense in Cincinnati that is very good with their pressure metrics, but they're not very good with their sack metrics. They're only getting a sack 5.1% of dropbacks. It's 4th lowest in the NFL. So I'm curious what insight you could offer about that pressure to sack conversion. And, from somebody who's fully in the weeds with the Bengals like yourself, what can you tell us about that?
Yeah, it's kind of baffling to be honest with you, because there's been multiple games this year where it's like, man, Trey Hendrickson was all over the field and you noticed him a ton. And then you look up and you're like, oh, he didn't have any sacks. And it's just, I don't know if it's luck, bad luck, or whatever the case is. But yeah, there are games where it feels like they're getting after the passer, but you look up and it's not like they have 5 sacks. They might have a sack. And Sam Hubbard led the way this year, and led the team in sacks. Trey Hendrickson was banged up a little bit towards the end of the year, but it is weird. And they don't blitz a ton, and they'll pick their spots to blitz, and I'm sure they'll have a blitz or two. for Josh Allen, but it will be at the right moment, at the right time. But yeah, if you get to Allen, you better hold on. At the same time, I think that they viewed a lot of those pressures as wins because you're getting, opposing quarterbacks to rush or throw the ball away or whatever the case is. Well, I'm not saying Josh Allen won't throw the ball away, but a lot of times he's going to try to extend plays, break the tackle, and
Right.
make a play, right? And so if you get him, you got to bring him down. On the flip side, pressures could matter because it makes him make a throw or attempt to throw that the Bengals would prefer him making with the right coverage in place. So it has been weird though, and it doesn't match up. I will say there are games as well where they haven't gotten a lot of pressure, and that might have been injuries. Hendrickson was playing through the broken wrist, still is, but I think it's much healthier now than it was, say, a few weeks ago. Hubbard was out for a bit. Hill missed a little time. Reeder certainly did. And you mentioned the depth. I agree with you. I think Cam Sample has certainly showed that he can be a reliable piece and rotation piece on this defensive line. We've seen flashes from Joseph Osai as well. That unit needs to make its presence felt and needs to find a way to get to Josh Allen multiple times. And whether it's rushed throws, off-target throws, or just sacks, find a way to do it. I think that's a big storyline for sure.
Yeah, I've had similar conversations from the Bills side of things about pressure rate, sack rate, and pressures are good, right? I mean, every quarterback in the NFL is worse when they're pressured significantly. And so, yeah, you a lot of times you play for that. You try to play them into low percentage throws, potentially some mistakes, and they're all a good thing. But I was interested because it felt like they had finishers, right? Like that was the thing
No
about the
doubt.
Bills is it's like, well, they didn't have Von Miller, they didn't have a guy that could really finish with consistency. And they don't have that player now, but that was kind of what I would lean into. But I was interested in your thoughts on there, and certainly appreciate you sharing that insight.
And there aren't many like plays that come to mind where it's like, oh, well, Hendrickson had him, and then the quarterback broke away from the tackle, or Hubbard had him, and like I don't really recall many of those. So and maybe there were some, but of course, right? But it's not like that's the case. So it is unique, and I think Lou and his coaching staff would say, well, maybe that comes back around for this postseason run and it balances itself out a bunch, but at least a little bit, because it's almost like turnovers to a degree. Like if you get pressures, maybe the quarterback just gets it out just in time, but it still affects him. And I think that's been the case more times than not.
You mentioned turnovers. That's going to be big in this game as well. I know the Bengals of late have done a very good job of taking away the football. If I'm not mistaken, 11 turnovers in the last 4 games, 2 4-turnover games in there, one against the Bucs. That's been something they've done well of late, and the Bills have been pretty gracious with giving away the football. And so in a game with, of this magnitude with these quarterbacks, I don't think you're looking to give away possession. So I think a big storyline for the Bills as well is to take care of the football in this football game. I don't think you can overcome some of the stuff you did against Joe Burrow that you did against Skylar Thompson last week. James, what do you make of this over-under? Courtesy of our friends over at BetOnline, they have it at 48. I thought that was a little low.
Oh, it went down, huh? Yeah, the Monday night one was at like 50, and yeah, I guess there's a little snow in the forecast. Well, guess what? Snow is not going to hurt either team. They both play in cold weather, and it might be a little colder up in Buffalo and a little snowier. I don't anticipate that impacting much. They're both going to throw it all over the field. I would take the over. I would hammer the over.
Right, because we got to do a score prediction, so I normally look at the over-under, and that's kind of my score range, and I'm predicting these numbers, and I'm like, yeah, I think this is going to smash the over. First of all, never bet the under, right? Like, not that we're betting guys, but just don't be that guy that bets the under. That's never fun. Don't root against points. But
don't score.
Right. That's no way to watch a football game.
Fun.
Especially if you don't have a dog in the fight, right?
Yeah. Punt. Yeah, like honestly, a 48-44 like slugfest, like that would be crazy.
Oh man. I don't know if we get that high, but
we don't. No, but hey, that would be one of those historic games that everybody remembers.
Right.
So.
All right. So they make us do predictions, so we will. And of course, we're recording this on Wednesday morning. We haven't had a practice. We haven't seen an injury report. There's a lot of variables throughout the course of the week. So obviously stay tuned into Locked On Bills and Locked On Bengals for coverage the rest of the week, which could obviously impact our overall insight on this game as we learn new information. But James, I'm not going to pick against the Bills. I obviously feel like the Bengals have a very good chance to win this game, but I like the Bills at home, 31-28. I think them being a two-dimensional offense should help them in this game. I think being at home is going to be a major advantage. Again, I certainly obviously see the path for Joe Burrow, but the Bills team's hot, just like the Bengals. They're at home, two-dimensional offense. Both are good on defense. I'll lean into the Bills here.
I don't blame you. I get it. It's Bengals fans are going to love this. This is a coin flip game. And it's one of those where the margins are just really tight. And especially now with the Bengals offensive line issues or potential offensive line issues. And yet, good luck betting against Joe Burrow. Like, I'm not doing that. I've seen it too often. And, he's 4-1 in the playoffs, which is the most playoff wins in Bengals history already. They've just found ways to make plays. And I think that, and Bills fans are going to love this, they played the best defense that they're going to face in the AFC bracket last week. And they had to do it back-to-back weeks. And they somehow found a way, even though it was a really tough matchup. So I expect this offense to be better. In the turnover part of this, so there's two things. I mentioned the skill guys. I have really high expectations for Jamar Chase, Tyler Boyd, and T. Higgins this week. Also, the turnover part of it, I think the Bengals win the turnover battle. It might not be as crazy as it was against Miami, where both teams are giving it back and forth. And the Bengals might have a turnover, but I think they get one more possession somehow than the Bills. And that's the difference. And we'll go high here. Maybe not 48-44, although I would love to make that prediction and be serious about it. Let's go 34-31. Evan McPherson delivers. He's had his ups and downs this year. Evan McPherson delivers a couple big field goals, and especially one late that it proves to be the difference as the Bengals escape Orchard Park with a win.
There it is. Now, who do they play?
Man, I'll tell you what. I hope for honestly, and this is where Bills and Bengals can relate. I want to play at home. I don't want to travel. I'm very much. My wife and I had a baby girl 2 weeks ago, and so I don't want to leave as much as possible. I want to try to stay homebound, and so let's go, Trevor Lawrence. Come on, sunshine. 52 touchdowns.
How I thought about this yesterday. That Jaguars team's not unlike that Bengals team from last year, right? Kind of
similarities.
Right, got hot, young number 1 overall pick quarterback that certainly comes into his own. I can see it, man. I think you got some really talented football teams here in the Final Four. And look, I don't think this is going to be an annual situation, I'm pretty sure, with Herbert and, well, Herbert's not here, but Lawrence and Mahomes and Allen and Burrow, and Herbert will be knocking on the door as well. I think this is the new AFC for sure.
And I think the Chiefs are beatable. Not just Jacksonville.
No question.
Wise. If either of the teams we cover see them next week, it's okay, well, they're good. But that defense isn't awesome. Can you just find a way to guard Jerick McKinnon out of the backfield?
Right.
Why is it rocket science to all these NFL teams?
Right.
I mean,
they've been vulnerable. Houston in overtime. Tennessee with Malik Willis took them to overtime. They lost the Bills and the Bengals, and I think the Bills and the Bengals were the better team those days. This might be the AFC Championship, James. But we said that last year about Bills Chiefs, and then the Bengals ruined the whole party, right? So you never know, man.
A lot in these two teams are they want to ruin the Chiefs party, because I think a lot of people are on the Chiefs still, nationally at least. So we'll see if they can.
It's gonna be fun.
Yeah, it is. And I'm going to be there, by the way. I made that call. So hopefully, there isn't a ton of snow on the drive up or the drive back. But that's going to do it for today's Locked On crossover. Make sure you keep it locked on Locked On Bills, Locked On Bengals all week long. We'll have the latest injury news and preview, and obviously post-game show following Sunday's matchup. For Joe Marino, I'm James Rapien. Thank you so much for listening to the Locked On Podcast Network.